It's now my pleasure to introduce two people who one that I've known for a long time, Mr. Eric Johnson, and Megan, who I have met several years back, and one of his great partners, Eric Johnson and Megan Kocikowski. I get it wrong every time, I know, but she can correct it as much as we can. But Megan and Eric have been working together at CPS, Comprehensive Program Services, assisting Georgia counties and cities with their public safety needs, including jails, courthouses, city halls, and public safety complexes. Collectively, CPS has handled over $4 billion worth of work over the last 27 years. My pleasure to introduce these folks. I know that you'll enjoy their presentation. Again, Eric's been around forever, wealth of knowledge. So let's welcome them up. Come on up, guys.
I'll go around here.
Okay.
Thank you, Tony. It seems like yesterday, buddy, I was visiting you at Lee Arendelle. When I come up 400, I always look at that sign and go, good night of living. That was a long time ago, buddy. That was in the 80s and 90s. So I knew Mike Smith back when he was at Habersham Metals, if you remember that. And long back in the days, we were trying to build a better mousetrap, okay? And Mike was always at the forefront of it. And I came from the design side. He was more the application side, obviously. And Mike, I want to congratulate you on what in the world you have done here, buddy. It's just amazing to me what you've created. I know where you came from. You were always one of the smartest guys in the business. Tony would tell you that too. You always solve stuff that we couldn't solve. So thank you, Mike, for all that you've done. And by the way, thank you for giving us the opportunity to spend the whole day up here. I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you. I guess we don't see our slides, but anyway, CPS, we have been around since 1998. We started in a criminal justice facility, and it was the foundation of what we wanted to do was, I felt like every owner deserved principal level expertise, experience on their projects. Okay, that was my fundamental thing. And it's grown from that, and it's just been wonderful. So on the agenda, talked a little bit about CPS. We're going to talk more about program management, what that means. I know it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but we'll tell you what it means to us and how it helps you. Early planning, which is critical, and then project implementation. So again, I talked a little bit about CPS. That principle, I still work. I'm still program manager on some significant jail projects in the state of Georgia. Fulton County being one of them, that's a tough one to wrestle, but we're the right folks, and everything's moving in the right direction for them. As you see some of our experience, but our fundamental core belief in this is that 90% of the decisions need to be made in the first 10% of the project. So that's what we believed in 1998, and that was more to try to get everybody on the same page. But what's happened, we come to today, and we're going to explain a little bit more. 90% of the decisions in the first 10% has taken on such a life of its own, and we're going to explain to you more about what that means. Again, this is some of our projects. Many of the major jails you've seen in the state of Georgia, we've been involved with a lot of the other folks in this room. My background, it's kind of funny that scrambled. I'm a mechanical engineer, so that was apropos that you had mechanical engineer up there from Auburn. I'm a recovering mechanical engineer, by the way. 41 years of experience. Obviously, you can read it right there, international. Worked with a lot of you folks here in the States and outside the States. So with that, I want to let Megan introduce herself and her background.
Hey everybody. So I don't have as much experience as EJ, not quite the gray hair, although I'm getting there. But what I think I bring to the conversation is a unique perspective. So prior to joining Eric, I worked for the state of Georgia for 13 years, actually as an owner. So on your side of the table, for those of you that are owners in law enforcement and such. So I was a state representative or state entity that really managed major capital projects and major renovations on the owner's side. So I understand you never get enough money to do what you need to do. You never get it often enough. And it's really, really important for us to be good stewards of the dollars that we're entrusted with managing. So that's really how I joined ERIC, is we have a shared philosophy, which is unbiased representation. Program management is all we do. And our goal really is to protect the owners that we're working with. So really what drew me to CPS was a focus on the public projects. So public safety, education, working with first responders, and then justice and criminal justice, because these are the projects that have an impact on the communities that we're in. And it's not just about safety and security, it's about a focus on behavioral care, how can we give a humane environment, how do we reduce recidivism, and we're really passionate about that. So I would just encourage those of you on the owner side, if you have a project, no matter who it is that you call, it's important that you call somebody. It is so crucial to make sure that you have an expert that's advocating for you on your project and looking out for you. So with that, again, with the mindset of these are really important projects, they don't come around often enough, Eric's gonna talk a little bit about program management and what it is.
You know the old adage, surround yourself with smarter people? Well, I've done that. And she's not giving herself enough credit. She's got a master's from Georgia Tech in building science. Building construction, I'm not sure what they call that degree. But she also is with the state, with GISFIC. And she ran a bunch of very critical, important projects for the state, one of which we were program managers on. And when she wanted to leave the state, she could have worked anywhere. Anywhere. Everybody had an opportunity, I guess, and I always just talked to her in general about what we did, and she would ask questions. I feel privileged that she still has incredible relationships, but that she wanted to come work with us. So she was an owner, so I guess we did a good job. So program management, next slide.
Yep.
All right, so 90% in the first 10%. You see, this basically, we're your advocate, we're your expert through the whole process from your initial thought about, I mean, Tony, I know you've done this before of, hey, I need a jail, I don't know what to do. Well, let's talk about it. You get a couple stats from them. Initially, when we come in, we kind of try to do a little space program for them, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We come up with what we feel based on our experience and expertise, what it's going to take you to fulfill that need that you have, okay? And we come up with a master schedule and a master budget. That's what we do immediately. So as a board, we'll get into it a little bit more in detail. We take that whole thing through this whole process of design, construction, all the way to closeout. And some of our partners in this room are maintenance professionals, some are work for Georgia Power. We actually, during that planning process, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but we can give the owner a 30-year life cycle cost of what it's going to cost to maintain it, what their electrical utility bills, everything. So when before we bring on either one of those next partners, design or construction, we pretty much have told that owner what it's going to initially cost, what it's going to cost to operate the next. You know, you can't go too far out because you just don't know, but we give them a projection, and certainly over the next 3 to 5 years, we can tell them what they can expect to pay, because building is probably the easiest thing that they can do. We help them and help them. They still have a tangly time with their budgeting when we open a jail, and we're going through some of that right now. So that's pretty much what program management and why we use it. So I could give you a lot of good reasons, my personal thing, but the bottom line is this: say on any project you have 100 tasks. Okay, in the old days, right, an owner would give 40 to the architect, because I worked for, I don't know how many of you guys know a fellow by the name of Mr. Paul Rosser. Okay, that was my mentor. And I think he founded criminal justice. I mean, the guy was amazing. I was fortunate to have him. So we would get a contract with 40 tasks. General contractor would get one with 60. Our two contracts weren't even written to where we could actually talk to one another. We still pick up some contracts where that happens. So of those 100 tasks, 40 would go to the architect, 60 would go to the construction folks, and the architect only wanted 25 of them, and the construction guy only wanted 50 of them. Really what it was 25 was the owners. I know there's owners in here. 25 of them are yours. And if we go back to that slide before, needed to happen in that planning phase, that 90% in the first 10%, okay? That's when those 20 of them needed to be made there before you brought everybody else on. So what happened was cost overruns, schedule problems. So we've basically eliminated all that sort of stuff. So the owner has his 25, sets the agenda to to where the architect has their 25 they want and they like, and they're very good at it and have the expertise, and the general contractor has, or CM, whatever delivery method Megan will talk about, they have their 50. So that's basically in general what program management, why you should use them, we feel. So turn it back over to Megan.
Fantastic, thanks, Eric. So when we talk about early planning, that's really the meat of what we're going to talk about today. So where is this in a project? So this is basically, you know you have a need, right? So I know I need a new facility. Maybe I know I need an expansion to a facility. Maybe, you know, in tune with the theme of today, I know I need a facility that's completely dedicated to behavioral care. Whatever it is, it's this amorphous thing, right? And you got to get your hands wrapped around it. So the initial planning process is really intended to get some concreteness or clarity around that plan, so you know what you need, what's it going to cost, and be able to advocate to get that project. So one of the first steps that we would recommend is to get a feasibility study or a needs assessment. So a lot of you probably know this, but public buildings really have a 50+ year life cycle, and that's really hard detention, right? And so there's systems coming along all the time and design that really helps with that. But we've got to build a facility that's really going to last a long time. So we look at county projections of population and crime, demographics. Maybe you've got case management reform or justice reform that's going to affect the numbers. And so we really project out what's your needed bed count for your population of your detainees. We're going to use that to establish a baseline. And I'm going to tell you, everything really past 10 years is a little bit of a crystal ball, right? I mean, it's really an educated guess, but it gives you something to start with so that we can really figure out what your needs are. We also interview stakeholders, so the jail commanders, folks like that. We look at your operational protocols and really use all of that to develop an architectural space list or a program so you know what types of spaces you need, what your square footages are. We work with architects to do this. And then we also make sure that us as program managers make sure that you've got the flexibility that you need in that program, because the one thing that we know, the only constant in this world is change, right? So we've got to make sure that we can program in spaces that are going to be flexible so that as you have new programs, new needs, new jail technologies, that we can work all of that into your facility in the future. So why is this so important to go through the study process? Well, we know that construction costs, believe it or not, are about 7 to 10% of the overall cost of a facility during its life cycle. Most of the cost from your facility is not the initial capital costs, it's your operations, your staffing, your maintenance. And so we want to set up a program that looks at how can we use efficient systems, get your life cycle costs down, be efficient with operating, use technology, and things like that early on in the study. So all of this really together, so the program, a budget that we develop based on that, a schedule, it gives you a plan so you can communicate your project need to the folks that are going to fund the facility, whether that's the Board of Commissioners or somebody else. So you can really go to communicate that need with a well thought out plan. So you heard Eric say that 90% of decisions really need to be made in the first 10% of a project. So every phase we go through, we're adding a little more detail and a little more detail. So maybe we're looking at the site, the subsurface conditions, making sure that we're planning for that. Maybe you don't even have a site yet, right? So we got to go look at properties, figure out what acreage you need, and then help you figure out how you can acquire that property. But really, this is about bringing the reality now to your plans. So in the feasibility stage, we're really developing a program of what your needs are with blinders on, and then we're telling you what a budget is to that. This is bringing now in financial reality, so how much can we actually afford, and how can we prioritize your needs to get you to a program that you can actually afford. We like to say that some of all is better than all of none, right? So we got to figure out what we can afford within the budget that you have. So speaking of the dollars that you can get, there's a lot of different financing options that are available to you that you may not know about. So we've got traditional funding, so special purpose local option sales tax, bond referendums, things that require a vote. But there's other options as well that we can help you explore. So one of them is a public-private ventureship. So essentially what that is getting a developer, you give them parameters, they build your facility, and essentially lease it back to you over time. Pretty uncommon still here in the United States, unless it's a really large job. It's a little more common in Canada, but we are seeing that coming. There's also other options depending on where you are. So specifically to Georgia, The state legislature has come up with a lot of different ways to have alternate financing opportunities. So if anybody wants to have a conversation about that in Georgia or beyond, we're happy to help you talk about your options. And then, by the way, it doesn't have to be a single solution. There's hybrids to combine some of these options to get you the funding that you need. So when we're talking about financing, we're talking about initial capital budget again. So what's in the budget, right? So that's anything from the property acquisition to management, design, construction, testing. And then again, our job is to protect you. So we're going to advise that you have a contingency because again, like we said, the only constant is change, right? So we want to make sure that we are accounting for unforeseen conditions and protecting you as the owner. But there's other things not in the initial capital spend that you need to plan on and account for. So that could be relocation of your detainees if it's a phased project. It could be temporary housing or outsourcing. It could be operations and maintenance after construction. And again, that's the largest cost that you're going to encounter for this job. So you've got to plan for that and make sure you have it accounted for in your operating budget. So then another part of the project is how the project is delivered. So how do you select an architect and a construction professional? When do you select them? How do you contract with them? How do you pay for them, and what are they responsible for? So you hear a lot about traditional or low bid, so design, bid, build. There's also alternate delivery methods that you can consider that will allow you to select based on qualifications, at least in part, for the consideration. So you have CM at risk, where a construction manager is involved throughout the design, looking over the shoulder of an architect, helping out with constructability, cost estimating, what systems to specify and provide. Or you could have design build, where you have a single contract where an entity is responsible both for design and construction all the way through. So why is this important? Well, again, we're talking about justice facilities, so these are more complex projects, so it's harder to low bid something as complex as that. So a lot of factors go into selecting the right delivery method, and you should really let the needs of your project guide what delivery method you go with. And we can help work with your procurement department on what laws and policies there might be to see what's available to you as an option. But I hope the key takeaway for you in this is that there are options that are available to select the most qualified and well-suited team to deliver your project. So when it comes to the actual selection process and selecting an architect, we help write advertisements, work with your procurement folks to figure out how to pick the right one for your job. But there's a few things that we usually will include. So of course they've got to have jail experience, right? So recent, extensive experience in jail design. But it's not just at the company level, that's also at the team level, so the folks you're going to be working with day to day. And then we're looking beyond just the architect. So the engineers also have to have experience in this type of facility. And then the civil really should have experience. There's different types of dirt all throughout the United States. They got to really know the area or region where you're working. And we're going to ask a couple other questions. So are they up to date on the jail standards? Do they understand the impact of the built environment on behavioral care? Are they on the leading edge or the bleeding edge of technology? And so what we mean by that is you don't want to be the guinea pig for new systems, right? And then what are the new products and systems that are out there that need to be specified on your project? And I would tell you the folks here in the audience today and at other seminars like this, they're the ones that are paying attention to this. And then we're going to call references on your behalf. We're going to make sure that the architect has capacity to do your job, that they're collaborative. And then there's that soft element, right? So we'll have an interview, allow them to present, allow you to ask questions, because really the most important thing is you want to work with folks that you want to work with at the end of the day. So when it comes to a construction professional, what we will craft up is a lot of the same requirements for the selection of that entity. But they also really need to know the local contractors, right, when it comes to site work, concrete, steel, drywall, paint, because you want to get the local presence because quality goes up and costs go down. But in addition to that, you really need to know at a national level the detention contractors that have the experience and specialty and expertise. And then a good construction professional is going to help figure out how to get those folks on board early, help to release long lead equipment and materials, provide integration of the complex systems and really avoid delays. So what I would kind of end with before turning it back over to Eric is that some of the most important decisions you can make is selecting your project team. And then once you get the folks on board, you're off to the races.
Yes, project implementation. Excuse me. So one thing in those RFPs, when we put them out, you remember we talked about the 20 tasks that the owner did before anybody else was involved, okay? All those decisions, which will be, whether it's a program feasibility study, a detailed program estimate, not a detailed construction estimate, we put that in there with the schedule, because we've done this enough. As Tony says, we got a lot of gray hair, and we talk to a lot of you all out there. We understand what's driving the market on different types of material, types of technology. The other nice thing is we've been doing this so long, we have a very good reputation. This is a very small circle. If you take a lot of missteps out there, you don't get pushed aside, but you kind of get pushed aside because it makes the whole team look bad. So we lean on a lot of folks. But we have that information, and we put it in the architects and the, lately we've been doing a lot of CM at risk, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we put that in their RFPs. And when they come for the interview, that we have a question. Tell us how you're going to meet these needs, program needs, in this budget and in this time frame. All right, and with these master schedules that we have this little box at the front that says critical decision zone. That's where all the decisions need to be, as a team. The owner has theirs, but there's a collectively, and 3 of the last 5 are inside that little critical issue zone. That's probably where 15 of the architects are, and probably 20 when we all get together, and that's really early again, and then we move on from there. And what happens during that sort of stuff is, as you all know, it's very difficult out there. I'll give you an example. Walton County, our first contracts that we let out, and we were probably 15% designed, maybe. All the HVAC, packaged rooftop units, switch gear. We got great relationships with Georgia Power, got in line for transformers, had to have a gas line moved in, so we had all that stuff out there. That transformer took 60 weeks to get there. If we had waited till we had a GMP, it would have never showed up. Permanent power is critical, right? Those rooftop units, it's interesting, we got pictures, we should probably have some, but we poured the slab for the housing units, and we had it lined with big package rooftop units. They showed up 4 or 5 months before they needed to be out there, but had we not done that, 2 things we did. We met the schedule, and we beat any cost increases that, who knows, something like a terrorist thing. I don't want to talk about that, but you just don't know what's out there. When somebody gives you a price, you give them a contract, and they buy it, but you better be right, okay? Which we, again, with folks in this room and with our expertise, we've been pretty good at it. So I'm not sure what the next slide is. Okay. Now that planning's over, suffice it to say, I know Joe wants to get us to get done too, so quick cocktail hour, unless you take the rest of our time too, which you can't do. Cocktail hour will come a little bit earlier. So very quickly, we are very, again, we have a lot of engineers, we have design experience in-house. We don't design, but we understand it enough to manage it. The thing that kills a project is you put a lot of lines on the paper, a couple weeks, an estimate comes back, and you're 10 million out, and you got to take all those lines off. Everybody gets frustrated. We try to, we even tried to do this when we were designing, put the lines on the paper one time, right? That's our goal, all right? So through this whole process, through every one of these phases, the owner is 100% involved, getting estimates through the whole thing, and our goal is to meet the schedule and no lines get taken off your paper, okay? It's a very seamless thing. And on construction, this is the fun part. If we did our job with everything else, construction's fun. Now, you might run into some unsuitable soils or whatever, but we usually have somebody person on site who is a construction background and understand the whole process, understand what it means. I look at it this way. Our primary role is to make sure the design team and the construction team have the information to design what we want and to build what the owner wants collectively. That's our job. We're a facilitator, very highly educated and experienced facilitator, so we can translate what the need is to each particular person, even down to a foreman out in the field. So With that, you can read some of that stuff, but with that, we're open for questions. Thank you. Mr. Smith.
So, I know Megan came from one of these agencies run by the state, and several states have procurement agencies. How do you kind of compare state versus local, where the needs are, where the expertise is? I mean, I'm just sitting here listening, thinking maybe the local, maybe you have some things at the state level, maybe you don't, but really the locals are the ones that really need this type of service.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I came from an agency that our entire job was selling the general obligation bonds and then building the major capital construction projects, right? So we did it all day long. We had, I mean, standards on standards on standards that, and certain ways of doing things, right? So what we typically find when we're working with counties and cities and some of these other entities, again, these projects come around, once every couple of decades. And so those standards don't exist. The knowledge about those delivery methods don't exist. Understanding the ways to protect the owner on how to procure, how to contract, things like that. So that's really where we come in. And that's really what I love about coming to CPS is that I can really see the direct value of how we can help, the owner really get what they need and protect them. Not that there's, always bad actors out there, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And so we can just help folks to make sure that they're getting what they need.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mike. Back when I know Department of Corrections is doing a lot of work now. They haven't in quite some time. Tony would tell you. Back in the day, we did the last at Rosser. We did 16 prototypes. Tony was heavily involved in those. We put those in some of the remote areas where we tried to spur employment. Mike, to your point, and it worked out really, really well. I drove into many cornfields thinking I was going to get dumped off at the tender age of 27 years old from some wardens and everything. They were playing a joke on me back in the day. It wasn't a joke. I mean, I really did. And then a crop duster would come over. So these were in some really rural spots, okay? So the state, not so much sure the state, but for us, and Megan mentioned it, when we do a county project or even a city project, we are I'm not saying we write it in the contract, but we suggest very heavily that they get at least 30% local participation with local contractors that are registered, live there, buy material locally. As Megan said, costs come down, quality goes up because people are actually investing in whether it's a SPLOST or a bond referendum. And she mentioned this before. I wanted to mention real quick. Mike, that's a good point. State they don't have unlimited funds. I mean, because at GISFIC, they've got a certain amount, but they can go back. When you pass a SPLOST, there's no more money. That's it. So that's kind of our bar. So when we give a number, it better be right. But there's sometimes, Megan mentioned this too, it's the biggest project any county is probably ever going to do. So when we're getting out of some of these rural areas where a 6-year Tier 1 SPLOST program, tax base, say we'll raise $50 million. Well, you need a $100 million jail. Happens all the time. That's what's happening out there. So they'll have to either go to a general obligation bond, create an authority. So to her point, there's mixing. They have to find a couple different ways to finance it too, which we get involved too. But that's a great question, Mike, on the local thing. We can.
Okay. So you explained a little bit about the selection of the architect and the general contractor and how the owner's representative helps with that process. For local counties that are looking to select an owner's representative, what would you tell them that they need to look for in that role?
I couldn't quite hear the question.
When counties are looking to select an owner's representative,
Mm-hmm.
what should they be looking for that role?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Maybe Megan, but I think what they need to do, so what we tell them to do, how about that? We give them a list of, say it's the jail. We give them a list of the sheriff and the chairman of the commission. Okay, not a not that a major isn't good enough, but we try to get the folks that are in a leadership role, and we tell the county that, hey, they're going to be calling, and they might call the county manager or whatever. Our biggest thing is, our biggest advocates are our owners. So we tell them, we can sit up here and do all this stuff, but you call some of them and say, did they actually give you a budget before they brought anybody else on, and did they meet it? I mean, that's kind of where we feel is the only way you can do it, because we could come in and say we're the most heavily experienced, this all looks great, but it's folks like you who say, yeah, they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I don't know any other way. So I told you before, she came and is now one of our partners. She was an owner. So I don't think it was just a fluke that we did really well on that state job that Megan was on, that she wanted to come work with us. So you can probably talk more from
Yeah,
from
no,
the
I would
owner's
just add a
standpoint.
couple things, because when I was on the state side, we did some program management selections as well. So I would say a lot of the same things that we talked about for the architect and the construction professional, which is, your qualifications, who is the team that you're going to be working with. Our services are considered a professional service, so oftentimes it's a qualifications-based selection. But I would say another important thing, and this one's hard to do, but right sizing the selection of the firm to the project is really important. And I guess what I mean by that is that you want that project to be incredibly important to the program manager that you hire. So for us, that's one of the reasons that we've remained like a boutique size company, is that we want principal level involvement on the projects that we manage. And so, sometimes when you get to the monstrosity companies, your project, while it's huge to you and really important to you, it may not be to them. So that would be another thing I would say to look for.
That's a good point. I was going to say this before. Back in the day, and I failed to mention why I felt like having principal level leadership on the project. So in my career, I did well, and every time I went to the next stage, I was promoted. And what happened was I was getting promoted out of what I did really well, which was interact with owners and run building programs. So the better off I did, the further away I got from what the owner was actually hiring us for. Right? It's counterintuitive, and you still see that every day. So when you get bigger, we're up to 16 people, we have no admin. Right? We're all program managers, heavily experienced. Well, we're nimble enough to take on what we know we can do. All right? If we mess up one jail program, we're out of business. We're out of the justice business. I mean, Tony and Mike can vow for that. That's it. You can't, at our size, so that's why we had that core belief. Right.
I'm sorry to keep adding back on and forth between each other. This is what we do when we start getting together. We talk forever. But one of the things that Eric always says that we do really well, or that you would want a program manager to do, is also, because these are public projects, they've got to manage the perception and be able to educate at the board level the need for the funds, the need for the project, the process, and things like that. So I would say also look for that experience specifically in the public sector, and the ability to engage, in terms of public relations and even community engagement.
Hope we answered you.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Megan.